Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parkinson's Foundation educational program, Take Time Thursday, for our Midwest region. Today's program is generously brought to you by Lundbeck. My name is Jessica Barch, and I'm the Community Program Manager of the Greater Illinois Chapter. We are so excited to bring together our three Midwest chapters for our program today: the Great Lakes Chapter, the Greater Illinois Chapter, and the Minnesota Dakotas Chapter. Please also note that our program will run until around 2:45 p.m. Central Time / 3:45 p.m. Eastern Time today. During this time of social distancing, we hope that you're able to stay healthy and safe at home. And in our efforts to reduce the effects of isolation to the PD community, the Parkinson's Foundation is now providing weekly educational and wellness programs in a virtual format through our newly launched PD Health at Home series. Visit www.parkinson.org/PDHealth to learn more and register for individual events. All virtual programs will be offered through Zoom, which is the web-based video conferencing tool that we are currently using today. If you are having any problems using Zoom, please click the chat icon on the bottom of your screen and message Danielle. You may also send a text to 646-388-7675. This is new for all of us, so we thank you in advance for your patience while we are getting used to doing things in a new way. One other note, I do want to encourage you all to turn on your camera so that we can see who is participating and have this be a bit interactive. Don't worry, we're all spring cleaning and we won't mind the mess. Before we get started today, I also want to encourage you to check out our Moving Day virtual walk. This virtual event on May 9th will bring together the PD community to support Parkinson's research and local wellness programs across the country. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Angela Roberts. Angela will present on ways to stay connected during social distancing and the importance of social connections. Angela, a speech and language pathologist, is an assistant professor of communication science and disorders in the School of Communication at Northwestern University. We are so happy to have her with us today. If you have any questions for Angela, please click the chat icon and type your question. We will have a Q&A portion following the presentation. Welcome, Angela, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. So I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. If not, then send a message to the chat function and I'll try to speak more loudly or to speak more clearly. So I want to share with you in about 20 minutes or so today a few tips that we have been finding helpful for the people that we work with in the context of my research program at Northwestern University. So my research studies people with Parkinson's disease and other individuals with different forms of dementia. And we specifically look at communication challenges, especially as conversations occur between people with Parkinson's disease and their family members. And we have been discovering a lot of helpful hints along the way over the last 4 weeks or so that we're looking forward to sharing with you today. So let me try to open that, go there. Okay. So just a few, sorry, I just had a little bit of issue navigating my slides, but I think everything's running okay now. So these are my disclosures, and I want to take just a moment to kind of share with you why it is really important to think about maintaining connections. And I like to think about this as maintaining connections and not just social interaction. And one of the reasons for that is that many of us, myself included, are actually rather introverted. So the thought of having a lot of social connections with people can be very intimidating. And in this time of social distancing, we're being told that it's really important to kind of stay engaged with others. But if you're naturally quiet and more inclined to kind of be more introverted or to stay at home, then you can feel pressure even by being encouraged to socially interact with others. So for some of us, it comes more naturally than for others. However, not thinking so much about the number of social connections that you have, but the meaningfulness of those connections is important here. And we know, for example, that maintaining meaningful social connections is one of the modifiable risk factors for developing dementia. and for just overall healthy cognitive aging. So it's not just kind of keeping connections for the sake of having people around you, but it's keeping connections from the aspects of keeping yourself mentally engaged with others. And so we think about these kinds of factors as being important not just for quality of life, but we know that when people are having difficulty maintaining and engaging with one another, it can increase burden, particularly on care partners of people with Parkinson's disease. We know that having difficulty engaging with others or communicating can affect how well you're able to complete your activities of daily living. And more importantly, we know that it can lead to social isolation, loneliness, and other mood challenges such as experiencing higher degrees of depression. But when people have Parkinson's disease, there can be some challenges. So we've all been forced to go to this more virtual world. We're on a Zoom call today, and I teach at Northwestern, and all of my courses have been transitioned to Zoom, and I, like probably many of you, have been struggling with how we convert all of our communication to this virtual world. And for people with Parkinson's disease, there can be a couple of added challenges here. One, their voice may be a little bit quieter, so it may be more challenging to be heard over a video interface or over the telephone. It can be more challenging in this kind of virtual space or telephone space to have enough time to process what you want to say. When we're face-to-face with people, we get all kinds of extra cues around timing of information or when someone needs more time to process what they're hearing, and we lose that in this virtual space or when we're on the telephone with someone. The other things that can affect people with Parkinson's disease is some people with Parkinson's disease have a little bit more difficulty forming their words, staying on track, organizing what they want to say, and that can be more challenging in these virtual ways and methods of communicating. So we've developed a few helpful hints and tips here that are informed by both the people that we have the privilege of kind of interacting with in my lab, but also our experience delivering interventions through video interfaces. So one of the interventions we do in my lab actually connects with people all over the world through a video interface. And so here's some of the tricks that we've figured out. And one of those is that video actually really does make a difference. So if you have the option to be on a Zoom interface like this, it typically is much more effective than just being on the telephone. And that's because people benefit from both hearing you and seeing you. So we know that as we get older and in our late 40s, early 50s, we're already starting to have typical age-related changes to our hearing system. And even if you don't perceive that you're having challenges hearing, you may be having challenges discriminating speech or understanding very fine nuanced differences in speech sounds. And so this is what happens in the morning when you get up and you say, gosh, honey, where's the cat? And your spouse turns to looks at you and says, the bat? What about the bat? And so those subtle differences are just kind of components of an aging hearing system. And there's been some research that has shown that when we add video beyond just the audio signal, that you can get benefits upwards of 30 to 70%, depending on the severity of your hearing changes, just from adding video. And so particularly in Parkinson's disease, where voices become quieter, sounds may sometimes not be as distinct in terms of articulation because of some of the motor problems attached with Parkinson's. They can be really helpful in conversations to have both video and audio. And the same is true if you're the person with Parkinson's who's listening to someone else. You having that added information of both watching their mouth movements, seeing their facial expressions, and hearing them can also increase your ability to understand what someone is saying and reduce chances that there's going to be a misunderstanding or a conversation breakdown. So when you're talking about adding video, one of the things that is important is to make sure that you can see someone's whole face. And so you want to make sure that your camera is positioned, and hopefully mine is positioned well today, where especially someone can see the lower half of your face. So eyes are really important for communicating, but it is super important to be able to see someone's mouth. This is why we are having, some additional challenges in the context of social distancing. If people are wearing face coverings over their face, and some of the people we work with who have Parkinson's disease have been complaining of increased challenges understanding people because they can't see their face and people can't see their face. So we have to cover when we're out in public in many communities now. So we don't want you to uncover your face for that reason. But particularly when you are on a video interface, it's helpful to make sure that the camera is positioned so that people can see your full face. Lighting is also a really important consideration. So today, before this video conference, I moved a lamp over closer to my desk. We know that natural lighting is more effective, and particularly it's important to kind of think about where the lighting is relative to you. And so you want to make sure that you have lighting either directly in front of you or to about a 45-degree angle from the side of your face. Again, if the room is not ideally lit, then people won't be able to see your mouth movements. And here, seeing your mouth movements plus being able to listen are really key. One of the things you'll notice that I'm using today is a head-worn microphone. And for people with Parkinson's disease, we find this is really effective. In fact, when we collect the data that we use in my research lab that are kind of conversation samples with people and also opportunities for them to tell stories, then one of the things that we know is that having a head-worn microphone gives us much higher quality data. And it does so because especially if someone has dyskinesias or has some extra head movements or trunk movements, then you don't worry about being misaligned with the microphone. And I'll show you in a minute why that's important. So having the microphone closer to the mouth, not changing your position relative to the microphone is really important for having a good quality audio signal. And so when possible, I like to recommend that people use a head-worn microphone set, either one that's connected to the computer or one that is wireless will work. The other thing that we use pretty commonly in our interventions are what we call these big blue microphones. And this is just simply an example of an external microphone that stands to the side of your computer and can be plugged into your computer. So that as well, if you don't like a head-worn microphone, can be helpful. These tools aren't necessarily terribly expensive, but they can really help to bring the microphone source closer to your face, so that your voice can be heard over either a kind of a telephone or a video interface and be really useful. The blue microphones we use because they're easy to use, the buttons are large, they're plug and play. So it's not that I'm brand promoting here, but over the years we have found that this is a really easy microphone for most people to use, especially if they're not particularly tech savvy. And that's because the microphone on your computer is not particularly good. So microphones, cameras are pretty good in computers, but microphones are not particularly good. And one of the things that we know is that microphones have a directional pattern, meaning that if you're right in front of the microphone, then people can typically hear you pretty well. But the minute you get shifted off to the side of your computer, then you can almost lose completely someone's voice. And so how you position yourself directly in front of the computer matters. Paying attention to where you're sitting in relation to the microphone matters. And that's why we're big fans of kind of using these head-worn sets or also using an external microphone that you can place right in front of you. And these can make a really huge difference in terms of being able to help you connect with others in a less frustrating way and in a more effective way during this time of social distancing. So these simplified interfaces, and I want to introduce them to you briefly, are really not for everyone, but they are for people who may have more cognitive challenges or maybe you are trying to connect with a loved one, a family member, a parent, a sibling who has more cognitive issues, who just find kind of working the computer or working their cell phone a bit more challenging. And so there's a number of devices that have been created, or even software apps that you can download that actually simplify the interface on a telephone or on a tablet, really creating kind of one-touch connections for connecting to video conferencing or sending a message. And these can be really effective ways of helping to keep people connected during these challenging times. They typically also have the benefit of being able to be managed remotely by a friend or a family member, meaning that you can install the software on someone's phone, but it can be controlled, updated, the icons shifted by a family member who maybe lives several cities away. And so these provide options for staying connected for people who may have more challenges using technology. So a couple of the ones that I have experience with are an app called Oscar. One of the downsides of these types of software and apps are that they do typically have a monthly subscription charge. I think the one for Oscar is about $5 a month. There are a lot of these companies, though, that are suspending those charges during the COVID-19 crisis as a way of making sure that people can stay connected. Amazon Echo Show is another easy-to-use tool where you can just activate and call someone using voice recognition, and that can help as well. So whether or not you're really tech savvy or not very tech savvy, there are several options that allow you to kind of get into this cardinal rule space for us, which is adding video to audio can really help to ease and reduce the frustration with having to connect in this less connected way. So I'm going to transition here briefly to talk about some other things that we have found to be really important during this time. And what I'll take a slight, kind of sidebar here to say the COVID-19 crisis has forced us to do something that probably we should have been doing earlier than now, which is trying to create new opportunities and really intentionally thinking about connecting with others in our lives. Some of us are really good at this, and others of us get so incredibly busy that we just don't carve out that time just for the purpose of social connecting. And while the COVID-19 crisis has been particularly devastating on older adults and those living in care facilities and people with Parkinson's disease and dementia and others, there have also been some silver linings, and one of those silver linings has been this reminder of just how important it is for us to intentionally think about connecting. And so one of the strategies that we like to recommend to people is that you actually schedule your connection time. Specifically, if you are communicating or connecting as a person with Parkinson's disease, or someone's trying to connect with you, it's important that you get that time blocked in your schedule, that you work it around your medication so that you feel like you're at that best point for you for the phone call. And this will actually help to create connecting routines. So mine right now is a 7 o'clock Sunday night call with my Canadian family. That's something that never ever existed before COVID. I now have regular calls with other friends and regular kind of tea parties and coffee hours with friends that otherwise I did not routinely do. And if I did not schedule that into my calendar, I still would not routinely do. So I think the scheduling piece is an important one, and I think knowing when to expect family members to call and check in on you, or when you're going to call, can reduce some of the unexpectedness or anxiety or worry of this kind of isolation period for us. The other thing around scheduling is to kind of think about creative ways to do this. So schedule a virtual exercise class with a friend. I have a link here, and I know the Parkinson's Foundation, both locally and nationally, also has some contacts for this, where there are actually some organizations offering virtual support groups, virtual exercise times. I came across a link yesterday that I'll share where someone's doing Dance for PD and online classes through Zoom. So that's what I mean about this opportunity, that people who otherwise have been isolated in part because of Parkinson's disease or other conditions, now we're kind of creating an infrastructure that enables and allows them to connect, whether that's through virtual spiritual services, social groups, exercise groups, or otherwise. And so I would encourage people to take advantage of these. Again, it's not about the amount of contact you have. It's not even always about in-person social interaction, but just having those meaningful connections with others is part of what we know contributes to brain health and to having a healthy emotional status during this time of social isolation. So I'll raise just a couple of fun activities that can be done online. These are not my activities, but they are activities that have come directly from the people that we work with who have Parkinson's disease and dementia. So things like music groups, baking with grandkids and baking with siblings and other family members has been really popular, doing that through a virtual. So I put my computer up and someone else puts their computer up and we engage in a baking activity. Playing games like charades are really well suited for this kind of video format. And so I think getting creative and thinking about, just as you've done today with Zoom, so sharing your screen and chatting to really optimize these technologies. There's lots of flexibility in programs like Zoom, and you have seen some of that today. And again, I'm not brand promoting Zoom, but it is what most of us are using these days. And so there's lots of options for setting up kind of these more interactive activities that family members can kind of help support you and others in setting up. The biggest question I get, and one that actually came in the course of this week when we were preparing this kind of large press release for caregivers with my Canadian colleagues, is, so what do we talk about, right? If I'm calling someone every day, I run out of things to say, and that certainly is true for me as well. But my advice here is always to remind people that when it comes to cognitive health and brain health, that it's not about having 5 million topics to talk about, but it is about connecting for just the sake of connecting. It's a-okay to call and not have anything to talk about, and it's also okay to talk about the same things over and over again. And this requires us to really evaluate and assess our motivation. Am I calling someone because I feel like I have to, because I have to check up on them, or am I calling because I genuinely want to connect? And I think when you are a person with Parkinson's disease, or you are calling a person with Parkinson's disease, it's reminding yourself that these calls are not just about putting a check in your box that you checked on your mom that day, or your brother that day, or your kids that day, but you actually called with the intention of connecting with that person. And it's amazing what just that subtle shift will do to take a call that might otherwise seem burdensome and make it seem like something that you actually really want to do every day. And this reminder to always be patient and to be fully present. I want to finish up here with a few tips that come directly out of the treatment programs that we do in Parkinson's disease and other conditions, which is communication is going to break down, especially in this format, whether by phone or through video. It is just going to happen. And how do we prevent those things as much as possible from occurring? How do we prevent conversations from just falling apart and people becoming very frustrated? And then how do we deal with it when those breakdowns do occur? So I want to share a couple of just, again, helpful hints that we have found over the years are really effective here. And one of those is to be mindful to present information in smaller chunks. So especially in this video format, it's going to take people more time to process information. There can be lags in the time signal. There can be breakdowns in the internet signal. And so even when all of those things are functioning well on the technology side, it can take more time to process information when you're not face-to-face with someone. And so remembering to provide that added time to break information down into chunks. It's okay to have a pause in the conversation to allow someone additional time to process what you're saying. And to remember not to call or make calls when you're in a rush. Make sure that you've carved out ample time to have that meaningful conversation and to allow extra time for processing and for getting ideas across. The other thing we like to remind people to do is to monitor, verify, and request. And by monitoring, we mean looking very carefully and watching people's facial expressions for signs that maybe they're having trouble following. So whether that is turning up a, sorry, I'm going to turn off. That was my timer to remind me to wrap up, and I'm almost done. So whether it's monitoring for signals of whether it's in facial expressions or someone's not responding or their response time has started to slow down, it's important to kind of look for those signals. When we're not face-to-face with one another, those can be harder to identify. And whether, again, you are a person with Parkinson's disease or you are communicating with a person who has Parkinson's disease, both of these are important perspectives. And so you just want to then verify if you think someone hasn't understood you or they didn't understand you completely, then just check in and say, you know, did you understand what I meant by that? Or did I say that clearly enough that you could follow me, right? So just do that very direct, intentional verification. And it's a-okay to ask for help. I don't think I understood that last word. I might have missed that. Can you repeat yourself? Did you mean to say? And so it's much better, especially in this, it's always better in face-to-face, but even more important in these more virtual modes through phone and through video conferencing, to make sure that we're doing all of these monitoring activities and that we're actually asking for help versus assuming that we understood what somebody said or that they understood us. We like to remind people to repeat, rephrase, show, and most importantly, stay calm. If you think someone didn't understand you, don't be offended by that. Just gently and calmly repeat what you said. Break it into smaller chunks if you need to, if there was a lot of information. Rephrase or maybe say what you said in a slightly different way with a bit of added clarification information. Use gestures or show what you're trying to communicate, but it's really important to stay calm. This is a heightened, frustrating time for a lot of us. And remembering in these interactions that they are more complicated when we're not sitting face-to-face with people. Again, adding things like video and amplifying volume through using external microphones helps, but these, again, challenges are going to be much more manifest in this type of interaction space, and it will be really important for everyone to be exceedingly patient and to use these kind of good rules of repeating, rephrasing, and staying calm. And then lastly, when things don't go well, so those are all the things you can do. You can monitor, you can request help for yourself, you can let someone know you did not understand them, you can repeat and rephrase. But when breakdowns happen, and they will happen, these are the things we don't want anyone doing. It's not helpful to raise your voice. When you raise your voice volume, even if someone says huh or what and sends you a signal that they did not hear, it's much more likely that they did not understand. And raising your voice actually can have the opposite effect. If you're someone with Parkinson's disease, of course, trying to make your voice louder is one way of resolving your voice issues. But if you're not the person with Parkinson's disease and you're communicating with someone else, and you think your voice is loud enough to begin with, raising your voice actually does a couple of things. It distorts your facial expressions, and it actually makes the other person feel as if you're yelling at them. And so we get this concern a lot from people who have Parkinson's disease, where when they don't understand someone and they ask them to repeat, the other person raises their voice up and it's like they're being yelled at. And that can be really demoralizing for people who have PD. And so being mindful to repeat what you said, maybe slow down what you said a little bit, but don't necessarily raise or shout or take your voice to an unnaturally loud level. And here, the other thing that we like to remind people to do is try to avoid saying what, huh, and eh. I'm Canadian. That's where that comes from. But they're not particularly helpful. It is really important to say, I didn't understand the last word. Or did you say Bobby went to the store? Those allow additional spaces for your conversation partner to know where they need to provide clarification. Things like just saying what, huh, and are not particularly effective cues. They tell me that you did not understand me, but they don't tell me what you didn't understand. And so especially in this kind of social distancing space, those things are important. So that was a very quick kind of round the world tour of some tips and tricks that we have found to be helpful in the context of the people that we work with, in the context of the interventions that we do, both from a tech perspective, but also from just a good communication rules perspective, and hopefully you found them helpful. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Angela. No, we really appreciate your expertise and sharing that information. And we're going to do about a 10-minute Q&A right now. So we did have some questions come in. And if there are any additional questions, please submit them and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So the first question we have is, because of Parkinson's, I have a hard time communicating my emotions through my face and tone. Any suggestions in better communicating how I actually feel?
Absolutely. And it's, you know, that is such a tremendous challenge for so many people. And it's that perspective of, you know, two things. Either A, I can't convey what I meant to convey, but also that disconnect in terms of what people think you were conveying when you weren't intending to. So that thought that someone thinks that you're cross or upset with them when you're not. One of the strategies that we often offer to people is just to be more explicit about what you are feeling. So and to do that with words in the same way that you might used to do with facial expressions. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. If somebody does something that makes you really happy, instead of just relying on your facial expressions to convey that, actually say, that makes me really happy. And if someone has done something to upset you, being just much more explicit with the words that you use around saying, that was frustrating for me, or it upset me when you did X, Y, or Z. And it's about converting. They're all emotional aspects, so it's just that you're having to take what we would normally communicate through facial expression or through gesture or through changes in voice pitch, and actually convey that with words instead. When finding words is challenging, and for some people with Parkinson's disease, that problem, especially in later stages, can be more challenging, then we'll even go to just facial expression boards or emojis on a phone that people can actually also access to convey their emotions to others. But for the most part, it can just be really effective to just be much more explicit about what you're thinking and feeling using words and not depending on those other channels.
Thank you, Angela. So the next question we have is, you mentioned scheduling a phone call to help decrease my worry. But what if I get dyskinetic or lose my voice?
Yep. And so, and I feel those challenges. And I spoke with someone yesterday who was having a really similar challenge. And I think in those moments, part of that is the realization that something could go wrong, right? The internet could cut out, you could become dyskinetic, you could just lose your voice completely. The one thing that we have recommended to people is, again, kind of buried in those slides as well, which is always remembering the motivation, right? You can connect with people without necessarily having to express everything you intended to say. And I think ahead of time, letting people know, sometimes my voice will cut out. Sometimes I might be more dyskinetic. The dyskinetic problem can actually be aided by using a headset microphone like the one I'm using now. But when those things happen, helping your friends and your family understand that that might just occur and that you don't have any control over that, but that even when it does, it's still really important for you just to be able to be there to see them and for them to be able to see you, and that connecting space can occur even if there's no words exchanged. It can occur And if you can't find your words in a moment, then playing a song that everybody can listen to, or knowing that your other partner that you're communicating with can pick that conversation up. So we like to address this by using the technology piece to help people with dyskinesia. We also like to address it by reminding people of that motivation is to connect, and connecting does not always have to depend on words. And so it's about addressing that motivation piece as well. Again, scheduling your phone calls can help a little bit with that, because it means you're kind of sort of getting to pick the time of day that typically is best for you, but always being prepared and flexible for when it doesn't, and just helping others to understand. Chat is another function, right? On software like Zoom, you can actually chat instead of getting your words, so it gives you an opportunity to just put in a chat that says, I'm having trouble, or give me a minute while you process your thoughts. So those are definitely challenges, but I think, again, rethinking about motivation, thinking about technology that might help, and reminding yourself that there's lots of other ways to communicate and connect that may or may not always have to depend on words.
Thank you. Going on to the next question. Any thoughts on how to support my spouse to participate in conversation and exercise and other part of a new daily routine / living?
Gosh, it's tough. I mean, establishing new routines has been hard for all of us, myself included. And my first piece of advice is new routines are tough for everyone. Some people with Parkinson's disease do have particular challenges in kind of taking on new routines, and your spouse may be one of those individuals. I think the important thing is just patience from a routine perspective, is patience and consistency. And so maybe not trying to convince someone to begin something before you do it, but say it's exercise, maybe setting up a 10 o'clock exercise video. And even if you're doing it by yourself the first couple of sessions, inviting your spouse to certainly come in to do the exercise with you, or to join a family call with you. But I think keeping the routine yourself and always making sure the opportunity is available. I think sometimes we set up expectations that I'm going to set up this new routine today and my spouse is going to join me today. That's not always realistic, especially for people with Parkinson's disease, and for some people with Parkinson's disease. So I would argue that setting up the routine and just starting it and getting it going and being consistent and persistent will be helpful, and continuing to offer that gentle, calm invitation. And you might be surprised at the routine may take off, but it may take a week or a little bit longer for that to happen. In terms of joining for family calls, I think it's about finding what's motivating about the communication for both people, and making sure that that communication interaction isn't frustrating for the person with Parkinson's disease. Again, if they're joining the call and someone's having trouble understanding them, or they feel like people are talking to you and not to your spouse, then it can be really challenging to even want to engage in that phone call. So if someone's not talking to me, why would I be in there, right? And so I think making sure that family members, others, and you actually know how to be a ramp for your loved one with Parkinson's disease. So making sure that they're positioned in a good space relative to the microphone, or that they've got an external microphone so that you know that they can be heard. Giving ramps and opportunities for them to come into the conversation. So if you know that there was a particularly interesting book that your spouse read, or something that they did yesterday that they really enjoyed doing, then you can open up that conversation for them and say, George, honey, I know you had a great day in the garden yesterday. Why don't we show, a picture of the flowers we picked to the kids, right? Or would you like to share them with the kids? So I think looking for opportunities where the conversation actually has an opportunity for your spouse to get into it, making sure that it's a conversation that's motivating for him or for her, and ensuring that all the other right components are there, where you know that they can be heard and seen and understood, so that there's minimal frustrations, are all good steps in that direction.
Thank you, Angela. And then we have time just for one last question.
Sure.
So, speaking of feeling frustrated, this question wonders when they will, hold on one moment. Sorry, just technology.
I feel your pain.
As I'm looking at my screen.
We all feel your pain.
We're all learning right now. So speaking of feeling frustrated, this question wonders when they feel frustrated when their spouse doesn't understand. Any tips on how to regroup or signal that I need to take a conversation break?
Yeah. So have your spouse call me. So we'll start there. So one of the things that we often will say, and people with Parkinson's disease know this about me, is I'll say the problem just isn't Parkinson's disease, right? And tiny little research sidebar. So we find in our research that about 2/3 of all breakdowns in conversation happen for reasons that are completely unrelated to voice or loudness issues in Parkinson's disease, and about 40% of those actually occur because of something the spouse who doesn't have Parkinson's disease did, right? So this is not just a Parkinson's disease problem. This is about collectively the conversation just not working, and people develop bad habits, and not everyone has good conversation skills. So outside of calling me, and I'll have that conversation that kind of explains good rules and those kinds of things, not in a punitive way or in a judgmental way, but when you live a long time with someone, you develop conversation habits that just don't work particularly well when Parkinson's disease is now in the mix. But I think if you're frustrated in those moments, having the awareness that you are is a great first step. And then I think the next step is just to have a very direct conversation around that and say, sometimes when we're having a conversation and it's not going well, I get tired, my brain gets tired, and that makes it hard for me to think and hard for me to organize what I want to say. And when that happens, I get really frustrated. And so I need to be able to give you a signal when I've had enough. And that signal, we often encourage couples to develop that signal between themselves. It might be a hand gesture. I have one couple who uses like a referee card, like a ref flag that says, I've had enough, and they both agree to respect that rule, that when that flag goes up by either one of them, that they're done. And this works best when there's also an agreement within the conversation relationship to know that you're going to come back to it. So this isn't you just trying to get out of having the conversation at all, but it's you saying, I respect you enough and I respect the conversation enough that I want to come back to it. I just can't do that right now. And so this actually takes some very explicit negotiation rule setting within a conversation relationship, whether that's with a child, a spouse, or your physician, to say, this is my signal when I've had enough and when I just can't process anymore. And because it's important to me, I need to give you this signal so I can have some downtime and then come back to it. There really is just no other way to do it well other than being very explicit in negotiating those rules in a way that works for both of you. So we try to help with that in our clinic. We try to support people in that conversation, but it just has to be dealt with in a very, very direct way.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela. We really appreciate all of those tips, and also we're going to, yes, we just appreciate your time, and also we've been giving little reminders around along the way that we are going to be providing all these resources in a follow-up email for everyone. So just wanted to let you guys all know that, reiterate that. But right now I want to introduce Kelly Weinschreider. So Kelly is a person with Parkinson's who is very active in the PD community, in our local PD community. And I've invited her today to talk about ways that she is coping with isolation during this time. So I'd like to introduce Kelly.
Thank you so much. My name is Kelly Weinschreider. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2002 at the age of 29, and I had deep brain stimulation surgery in 2016. I worked for the first 10 years after diagnosis until medication side effects and disease progression forced me to leave my job. Since then, I've started 2 young onset support groups in the local Chicagoland area. I'm also a very active volunteer for the Parkinson's Foundation. I've been part of the regional and national teams for women in PD and a member of the People with Parkinson's Advisory Council, better known as PPAC. I'm also a board member with the Parkinson's Foundation Greater Illinois Advisory Board, and I'm working with the Northwestern and the Parkinson's Foundation to raise awareness of Parkinson's disease in underserved communities in Chicago. My father also has Parkinson's, so I'm a part-time care partner for him. Like many of you, I suffer from apathy, anxiety, and depression, so this time of social distancing has become a challenge. My normal exercise routines and planned social interactions have all changed or stopped. My husband is now working from home, so it's further changed my daily routine. I'm staying social by transitioning one of my monthly support groups to a virtual platform that is now meeting every 2 weeks. In this time, people need more support from friendly faces that understand the day-to-day challenges that Parkinson's presents. I'm also continuing to volunteer for the Parkinson's Foundation. I'm reviewing grants and working on opportunities for the future. Finally, I'm staying active by training, walking, and generally entertaining a 4-month-old golden retriever puppy, which is a lot of work, but very rewarding. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Kelly. We really appreciate all of our volunteers and our local volunteers. And Kelly, as you heard, is just like a super volunteer and is so involved in the, not only in her local community, which is my local community, so I'm lucky to live near her, but as you heard with the Parkinson's Foundation. So we're so lucky to have her, and I just want to thank you for taking the time today, Kelly, and joining us as well. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. So again, thanks to both of our wonderful speakers today for just sharing their time, expertise, and their experiences with us. And really thank you to all of you, the community, who are able to join our program today. We hope to see you again soon on one of our upcoming virtual programs. Please note, next Thursday, AARP and the Parkinson's Foundation will be jointly hosting a webinar together addressing the newly diagnosed and the care partner community. In addition, our Care Partner Summit will also be virtual, and that'll be held on Saturday, May 16th. Please come join this important event where experts will address the concerns of those specifically to people caring for people with Parkinson's. And lastly, so just remember that April is Parkinson's Awareness Month, so you can visit us online at parkinson.org/awareness to learn more about your Plan for PD campaign and how you can help raise awareness. To order free resources like our Newly Diagnosed Kit or educational books, visit parkinson.org or call our toll-free helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and be well.